Hello, this is Anna Hampton, and today's video is Henna Gospel Training. The reason we want to risk our lives is because we're there to share the gospel and have an eternal impact as much as Christ is calling us into that place, whether it's dangerous or perhaps it's less dangerous. But henna is one of the easiest ways to build bridges of relationship and share the gospel with women all over the world. I want to give an overview of how you would go about using henna to share the gospel. So first, what you want to do is you want to decide on a story that you want to tell. Do this prayerfully. If you're just beginning a relationship, you probably won't start right with the story of the crucifixion, but perhaps something a little bit easier to understand. Like, for example, the story of the woman who lost the valuable coin in her house and she cleaned it until she found it. So decide on a story prayerfully with the Holy Spirit's leading. What is a good way to start? Once you've decided on a story, practice telling it in your first language. Whatever it is that you read the Bible in, practice telling that story in your first language. For me, that would be in English. Then, if I'm going to be telling it, for example, in Dari, I would get a translation of that or translate it myself, especially if I'm still working on language learning. And then I would practice telling that story orally in my target language. I may have to write it out first in my target language and then practice it orally so that I can do it hopefully without notes in front of me. Once I have the story down, then I have to decide how I want to draw it on my arm. I tend to use my arm, not my leg. And so if there's not already a template of that story in the downloads, which I'll explain later, then you have to practice deciding how do you want to do it, what elements you want to include in telling that story based on which design you want, African, Asian, or Arabic. Next, you want to be able to either make your henna or buy a prepared henna cone. There's a video on my webpage of how you would actually make the cone part that the henna goes into and then how to actually prepare the henna. Both take a little practice. But if you're not in a place where you can just simply buy and have a cone sent to you, then you want to learn how to do this. You also want to practice drawing your design on paper, and then you'll want to practice drawing it on your arm. Now, I would suggest practice a couple times drawing on your arm, and this means that you'd have to allow probably a couple weeks of preparation, at least at the beginning, so that you can draw your design on your arm, let it fade away, which takes about 7 to 10 days, and then practice again, and then be ready to be able to do it with the woman or the women of the family that you're going to be sharing this with. It also takes practice in how you hold the cone and how much pressure you apply. You'll notice as you begin to practice, you apply more pressure for thicker lines and less pressure for thinner lines. You also have to get used to applying more pressure as the henna runs out of the cone and the cone is more empty. So all of that takes a little practice, and just be prepared for that it's a part of learning any skill, that it takes daily or regular effort to practice and learn different techniques with your cone. As far as doing the henna design, both on yourself and on a woman, if you're going to do it on another woman, you would plan to do it at a certain time of the day so that you have at least 4 hours to let it dry before brushing it off. Now, let me just pause there and say that I actually never applied it to another woman. What I did is I applied the henna design to myself and then told the story once I had gotten to her house. So I did the design on my arm, let it dry. Either I try to let it dry for 6 to 12 hours or overnight, and then maybe I brush it off, and then maybe it's the next day that I'm going to her house, and then I tell her the story there. So some of you may want to get to the place where you have it on your arm and then you're also drawing it on another woman and telling the story at the same time. So you're going to be different on how you do this. But for me, I would do the design on my arm early in the day, let it dry as much as possible for at least 6 hours on my arm. And the best stain you get is if you can keep it moist as long as possible. So that's where the lemon spray comes in. And you can buy it, which is a ridiculous price, but if that's easier for you, then buy it. But you can simply make this liquid by using pure lemon juice with some sugar and water. Again, the recipe for that is found on my website, or you can just simply Google recipe for henna lemon spray, and you can make it and use that. And the longer you can keep the design moist on your arm and not ruin it, the better the stain will be. There's also techniques for how to sleep with it overnight so that you can get an even longer time of that stain on your arm. Okay, so next what we want to do is we want to practice some of the main elements of henna. And so here on this slide you see line draping, humps, dots, circles, paisley, flowers, leaves, and vines. And each of these, there's even more designs that you can do. So these are just the basic way to start. So I want to show you some of the designs that you can do for the basic elements of beginning henna. First off, I'm going to take my cone that I got from Amazon. This is the Henna Guys cone. And they have a plastic pin in the cone which keeps the henna inside dry. So you want to pull the pin here, and then don't lose this pin, or swap it out with a metal pin, which is better. You can see that this one has bent, and so it's not fabulous. So let's start with the basics. The basic line is the first one because you're going to use this for a lot of things. So what you want to do is you want to start. I kind of draw a dot in a sense to get my henna started, and you want to let the line fall. Okay, you can see the inconsistent size here, and that has to do with my consistent pressure. Let's do another line. You can see I did better then. And as you let it falls straight. Now you don't want to put your tip down and then drag it across the paper like this. It's just not, you're not going to get a good consistent line, and it's going to bunch up. As you can see, my cone is kind of bunching up. So you want to have a little tissue to clean the cone as well, but don't touch the tip to the paper. If you want a thicker line, what you're going to do is you're going to first draw your thin line, let the line fall, draw a line close to it, let the line fall. Then you're going to color it in by doing another line. Because I've angled this, I can't actually see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm doing another line to let it, and then letting it fall to color it in and making a thick line. Okay, so again, lines are, you let them fall. It's called draping. Okay, now next let's do humps. To do a hump, you're always doing it on the line. So what you're going to do is, I do this left to right. You might be right to left. Do what feels natural and good for your hand. And you can see that it takes practice to have consistent humps. These are not consistent at all. Okay, partly it's the angle of how I'm holding the paper so that the camera can see it. Now, let's do another one that's maybe a little better here. We're going to get our line. If the line breaks as you're drawing it, you can just go back and fill it in. I've seen Gopi Henna do that too. Okay, let's try to do some consistent humps here. Again, it has to do with my pressure on my cone, that I'm doing the same amount of pressure. Okay, these are smaller humps. And now I want to show you the dots. Well, that's not consistent at all. Sorry. If I can do this as a theologian and scholar and writer, and I'm not very creative, then you can do this. I'm trying to do the dots at the top of each hump, and you want your dots to be consistent. Okay? You can also practice doing dots in, like, let's say 3s, because sometimes you might add that detail to something. All right? What about circles? Let's do some circles. Now, circles, you can start on the outside and go in, or the inside and go out. My technique is I start on the inside and go out, but again, do what works for you. And actually my line broke there, so I'm going to go back and connect it to the line in the middle. And you can see that I sort of touch the line and touch the paper, and that's not good. Also, you want to practice circles so that it's consistently close to each other. So let me try one more and see if I can get a smaller circle where the lines are close. That's a little better. What I'm doing is I'm trying not to touch the paper. I'm trying to let the line fall as I did with the straight lines. I'm letting the henna fall, and I have to push consistently on the cone with my hand. So how I'm pushing here, it's going to continue to be, I have to keep pushing the henna down as I use up the cone. Okay, so what about, let's do paisleys next. I'm not very good at paisleys, but we're going to give it a try here. Okay, so we're going to start up at the point, come down. I'm going to let the line fall on the fat part of the paisley. Don't worry if the line breaks because you can go back and fix that. And then I'm going to come to the point here of my paisley. That's actually not so bad. Okay, now what would you do inside the paisley? You can do all sorts of things. You could do dots. You could do circles. You could do a number of things. You can also make this like more detailed by drawing a border around it. That would be one thing you can do. Let the line fall. Go back, and if the line breaks like that, you just go back and fill it in. Here I'm just drawing lines and letting them connect. I am touching the henna lines with my cone to make sure that this goes all the way across. You'll find that on hands that are older, it's a little harder because as we age, we lose the fat, and so there's more valleys on the skin, especially on the back of the hands. But also hair gets in the way. So sometimes I do have to, on the skin, if there's hair, I have to push a little harder to really get it down to, push the hair down on the skin so that the henna is actually touching the skin. Otherwise, you're not going to have much of a design there. Okay, so I've done that. And then now let's say that I just want to do thick dots. Maybe that's the easiest. And so maybe I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to do these evenly spaced out. Okay, so this would be just one idea. You could also do mini little spiral circles inside. The possibilities are simply endless of what you can do and what makes it look really elegant and complicated. The more complex it looks, the more fun. But one way that you make it look complex is by being very, very symmetrical and just continuing to add to it. For example, something like this, let's say you wanted to add humps to it. You could do that. And you just keep building it out, and you just go around like this. I find it helpful to go to Pinterest and Google Images and get more ideas of fun ways to do this. And you can see where the henna is kind of not solid. It's because my tip touched the paper. So I'm going to go back and those places where it touched and it's not solid, I'm going to go fill those in and so forth. Okay, so we have a paisley. What about flowers? There are so many flowers you can do. I'm going to draw a small circle, and then really it's the petals are like a big hump, except for I'm bringing together here to a point. And the goal is to be consistent as you draw these petals. The consistency comes in how long they are and how wide I'm making them. Now, I generally go left to right, but in this, and then you can't always turn somebody's arm or hand, especially if you're doing yourself. But you just try to practice and get as consistent as possible. Now, you can do the leaves of the flower a couple of different ways. You can kind of draw the leaf coming out as if the flower is sitting in it, like that. This is just a simple pinnate type leaf. But there are many types of leaves, so you're going to want to look at either gopi henna or just general designs of henna leaves and get some ideas of what you can do. So I'm not going to put them all on my website because it's very easy to find more ideas on leaves. This would be one way you could do the leaves. Okay, another way, and we could add another leaf like this and so forth, all right? But another way you could do it, just make a traditional flower, and that's where you draw the stem coming out, and you could do the leaf like that, if that fits your design. I don't know that I've ever done this before, and then again, you would fill that in. So you've got leaves. What about the vines? Okay, so for the vines, there's many different types of vines you can do. You can do a straight line or a curved line. Let's just do kind of what comes out. Okay, let's just do a straight line. Now, the technique for vines is also kind of what feels good for your hand and what seems like it'll work. So you want to push the henna down as my cone is emptying out. I've been working on this video, so it's emptying. Okay, so I like to go on the outside. I squeeze it out and then come in at an angle, these leaves. And the consistency is how far from the line I am and how much I'm squeezing and then curving it in. You want to be as perfectly consistent as possible. So each one of these elements that I'm showing you, you would practice every day so that you can be as consistent as possible. And obviously I need to be the same distance on the other side to make it symmetrical. The more symmetrical, the more beautiful it is, especially in the Arabic design. So, and I talk about that in a few minutes in this video, that I prefer the Arabic designs. They're easier than the Asian. And I don't serve in Africa, so I find Arabic to really fit what I do. You can add a little leaf here, kind of a finisher. All right, that's one idea. Okay, I colored it in here to make it a solid piece, make it kind of a point at the top. So there's different types of vines. This is just one type. There are open leaf designs as well that you can do. I don't tend to do those because it takes me more time, and so I just keep it simpler. All right. So, but you have those options as well. There's many, many options. And for those of you ladies who are better at this than me, you'll be able to make these even more complicated. I mean, again, this is where you could do dots to complicate this. The dot needs to be consistent. Okay, so forth. So you get the idea. Those are the basic elements that you want to learn as you're beginning your henna gospel journey. I just wanted to show you that henna gospel storying came from a couple of women in the IMB who figured out how to do this in Africa. And it used to be part of the IMB website. I noticed that they have their own now. And originally, it seems like they started with trying to have a standard elements for each thing for God created or sin or Jesus came. But really, you have freedom as you're creating your henna design. You can change things, you can swap them out, and the more you practice and see, you'll get an idea of what works for you and how you want to share the gospel in your context. But I just want to acknowledge this is where it came from. The next side just shows you some of my favorite websites. First off, learning how to actually mix henna, how to make the cones, how to do just the basic designs. I have found gopihenna.com to be an excellent resource. And then she also has a YouTube channel, which has been one of the most complete YouTube channels that really explains how to do henna, how to get started, how to practice regularly. She also has free downloads. You can buy henna from her. It's very expensive, but it is excellent. But she gives you all the basics in far more detail than I am doing here on my website. The hennastories.org is the website that the IMB ladies created, and that's where you can find all the downloads that I have in my notebook. They have their African designs, Asian designs, Arabic designs, all of different Bible stories. And there's just a couple Bible verses there, but you could certainly develop and make your own designs. I have mixed my own henna and made my own cones, but you can also simply buy it if you're in a situation where you can buy from Amazon. I have found the henna guys to be a great resource. Those cones they're pretty good. The tips are not as fine as if you either made your own or bought from gopihenna.com, but they're adequate and it's fine enough for doing basic practice and then also doing designs, whether it's on yourself or on another woman. So these are some of the websites I found. You can also go to my website, thealgaeverest.com henna, and that's where I have a number of the sheets and I explain more basics on doing gospel henna. And you can compare some of the things I have on my website with what's available at hennastories.org as well, because it's all slightly different and all helpful. So take some time to look at these and decide what you need to be able to move forward with sharing the gospel using henna. Thank you for watching this video. I'd love your questions. Feel free to contact me or even send your designs and I'd be happy to post them here at this website.